Hi, welcome to another episode of I Mustache You Something. I've got my mustache shirt that Luca got me, and I am excited to be here with uh, the triple A, triple threat, Dr. Azer Bestavros. um, and our friends Anthony, Zaki, and Alex Faheem. Um, and I just asked them what they'd like to discuss, and Anthony um, nailed it. I think he's got exactly the right idea on what we can discuss that I think is a common thread between um, the conversations that I had with the three of them already. So Anthony, I don't want you to kind of necessarily repeat, but can you repeat anyway?
I think we all had a slightly different approach to conversation in our discussions with you. Uh, what do I say? How about Uncle Azer?
You just make me feel old, that's all.
But I found my new dear friend to have the most balance in discussion, and so perhaps one of the things we might be what we were talking about was how we might be able to progress as a community through discussion and conversation.
And I'll remind you that my conversation with Alex was like pulling teeth, and I had to sit here and stare at him like this to get him to say anything at all. And when I talked to Alex and Anthony, Iser, you'll find this funny. I asked them, who do you suggest? I said, we can invite anyone for us to talk to, and they suggested you, Jesse Newman, Ralph Toss, and Peter Pham. And I said, first of all, I'm never doing another mustache interview with Peter Pham unless like I'm pre-medicated. Number two, Ralph and Jesse will eat you guys alive. Like the two of you will sit there like this. And Ralph and Jesse will talk the entire time. So I thought I thought you were like a really nice compliment to these two mutes that we have. So
I don't believe a word of what you're saying, but it's fine.
They don't talk.
Well,
they don't.
That was
like,
the goal of having them, that we wouldn't have to talk.
like guys, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think? Like it's just it's hard to converse with someone who doesn't speak.
What's the question though? So what?
So you have a gift, and this is why I thought it would be interesting. And Anthony nailed it. I think you have a nice balance between offering your opinion, sometimes cleverly offering your opinion phrased as a question, but really also not just being opinionated. Like you have opinions and you have questions, but you also do a very good job listening and really attending to the person. And I think my conversations with um, Alex and with Anthony left a little bit of a gap in that I'm more likely than not to say what I have in mind. And they are more likely than not to keep their opinions to themselves. And all three of us felt like we could find our way to the middle a little bit, where I can do more listening and understanding, and they can be a little bit more open with what they are thinking, because they have a lot to contribute. Like they're both very, very, very bright, very, very thoughtful, but they're less likely than I am to offer um, something that they have to say. So that's the question. Like, when do you speak and when do you listen? And how do you how do you discern when is the right time to do one or the other?
I mean, I think what I remember from many of the discussions I had with you, I don't know if this was the sort of on the YouTube or not. So I never shy with my opinion. I always say it, but it's only when people ask me. In other words, and I feel that this is sort of important because, you always have to ask why somebody's coming up with their opinion. If somebody asks me a question, the answer is right there. I'm answering your question. I'm telling you what I think. So if somebody wants to know my opinion, I will say it, and I'll engage in a discussion. I want to tell them everything, the way I think, even if independently, I may not go out and actively just say that just because I want to say it. So I think that there's sort of that balance of, and I think in our discussion with you, I think I complained that as a community, the Coptic community, we don't have enough forums for people to ask questions and to ask questions of each other. I think that I grew up sort of seeing that as an issue in our community back in Egypt. Did the youth have an opportunity to ask questions to very successful lay people who are very great servants of the church, lawyers, doctors, etc., where they are put in front of others to ask questions of. They usually are not going to come out to say what they want to say, but if you ask them, they're very honest, and they'll just tell you what they think. So I think that's the part. It's not about so. Are there opportunities? I'll now ask Alex, where if you are asked a question, you will not answer it just because you don't want to maybe expose opinions that you may think are not popular or whatnot. So I find that to be sort of the right balance, which is if people don't want to ask me a question, that's fine. I'll keep it to myself. But if they ask for it, I'm not going to worry about how they think or other people think. If they go and tell people, oh, Azer thinks that crazy idea, whatever it is, or vice versa. So I feel like that's sort of where sometimes these issues come out. Because we don't have enough of opportunities, some of us probably be more vocal and go out and talk and then be seen as troublemakers. If I may, this is basically me, now maybe one extreme. And then the other extreme will be people who are silent, who you sort of, even if you ask them, they sort of say, well, what is it going to get me other than trouble? Someone's going to say anything. And I think that's basically where I feel, what are we doing to bring these two pieces together? I don't know. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
I think so.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
Question.
I see what you're saying. I think it makes sense. Did you have any thoughts yourself?
Alex, I am going to get in the car and drive to your house and scream at you in person, because screaming at you on the Zoom doesn't seem to be effective. So, Azer, this answers your question. So if you're asked the question, you'll answer it. You specifically asked Alex, what do you think? And he didn't answer. And Anthony said, Alex, what do you think? And he said, mostly to bother me, but also because that's his baseline disposition. I don't know. What do you think? So I don't know if that's culture, and I don't know if that's, I don't know, like society. I don't know what that is, but there's definitely like an inertia against, speaking our minds. And I don't know, like,
but I think, let me ask a direct question. So if somebody asks you for your opinion and they may not like it, would you say it or not?
Me specifically?
But they ask you, well, all three of you, I don't know. I mean, it's just that, and I think last time we talked, Mina, I said that it's partly also my job, right? I mean, I'm a faculty, I teach. I do research. My job in research is to criticize everything. Like, it's my job, right? So, and I just got trained to do that. Now, if my graduate student who's going to do a PhD with me doesn't ask me a question, to some extent, that feels their loss, you know. But I don't. So I feel like the question is: are there? Do you mind if people ask you questions? Are you yourself asking questions? Because, you know, if people will ask you if you ask them too. So I think that's the question. Are we? So maybe I will turn it around. Alex, what question do you want to ask? Are there questions you want to ask about the church, about
I want to say yes. Although if you ask me what question do I have, I think I'd have to think about it for a bit.
Yeah, and I'm not, no, actually, so that's good. So there are questions you want to ask, and maybe the next one is, and how do you think, what are the right forums to ask these questions?
I guess I would ask other people I know.
So if that's the case, then if you turn the table around and somebody has a question for you, then you would answer it, right? Because if you'll go and ask them the question. So I think my point is that, and this is what I feel we just don't have, which is, I'm happy to answer questions, right? But I also am happy to ask questions, because I think with the same expectation that I would want to answer a question, I think it's only fair that the other side be heard. And the only way to hear the other side is to ask them. And it could be asking them about sort of what they think about what I'm saying, even, but it can't be one-sided, I think. I mean, many discussion, Mina in particular, I love talking to him. We don't agree sometimes, but it's always this question back and forth, right? And I think that's how you get people to sort of maybe even change their opinions a little bit. So anyway.
What about, and so you touched on something with regards to saying your opinion. I think a lot of times in our community, though, people don't want to listen. So what about speaking when people don't care to hear? Or even if they will listen to you, may shut you down right away and kick you out?
Then they don't want really to listen to my answer. I mean, I think that, you know, I think it's, you're right. I think that, you know, are people asking the question to get the answer they want, or they're asking a question to really find out what you think? And I think it's very easy to discern these two. You know, and if you can't, then you figure it out as it goes. I hear you. I agree with you. There has to be some level of honesty. Do you really want to ask the question to find out what I'm thinking? Or is it like an entrapment? You want to ask me so that I can say something and then say, see, you're wrong. And I think you have to assume that the purpose of the question is to engage in a discussion, not necessarily to change, you know, one other's opinion, but to get a stock of what, you know, what other ideas I should consider, perhaps.
One of the things that came up between me and Alex in our conversation, and this comes out often, this is like not isolated to the mustache conversation, is if you have something valuable to offer and you're confident that it's not entrapment, that the other person is genuinely interested, why is there still a reservation about saying something? So Alex, if you could dig really deep and say something that's not a question and something that resembles some semblance of an answer as to why that is.
I kind of feel like Anthony may have touched upon this already, where he mentioned that, like, you know, sometimes we don't say anything because we're worried we're going to be met with rejection, or even if it's not like rejection, straightforward rejection, it's disinterest. So there's like a futility to it.
Right. And you kind of said this. You said, most of the time you interact with people, you feel like they're just waiting for you to stop talking so that they can, continue their, external monologue, right? And I think, I forget what my response was, but it was probably something along the lines of, okay, but not everyone is like that, right? And if you can discern and figure out, who's actually engaging in true, genuine conversation, then you're put in a position where that's less likely to happen, right? And I don't think that's true of everybody. Yes, I agree that does happen sometimes, but I think that if it's not everybody and it's not all the time, then what Azer's getting at is there is a benefit to the situations where, yes, I have someone and I have something for us to discuss where there is a sharing of ideas. But despite that, there's still some resistance. And again, my question remains, why?
So I mean, let me ask Alex something different. Why are you saying that? I don't know if that's right. This is what you said, but you're afraid of rejection, or you just don't want to say because it's going to be rejected, or something like that. But if a person is asking you a question, that's not the purpose of the question is to accept or reject your answer. The question is to find out what you are thinking. So, I don't know if it's the same as this proactive, like, I want to ask you something. Hey, why don't you help me with this? And you say no. That's a rejection. I want you to do something for me, and you don't. But if I'm asking a question, like, what do you think about, pick your favorite topic, and should churches do X, Y, and Z? Okay, fine. You know that there is maybe two opinions about it, maybe multiple opinions about it. But if somebody's asking you, why presume anything other than they just want to know what you're thinking? And why not give them that? I think that's, to me, is that's an anti-communal thing to do. If it's almost like being selfish, right? You just want to keep it to yourself. But how do you think communities form an opinion? I mean, so forget about the case where people entrapment and anything like that. Let's assume that everybody has the right, they are really sincere about their question. I feel like not giving an answer because the answer may not please somebody, or they may not be agreeing with it, is a fairly selfish, actually. I mean, you're not being generous with your opinion with them. Now, granted, it may be rejected and it may hurt you, and maybe you just don't feel good about it later. But to me, sort of, you have to presume that the reason for asking is to hear your answer. So I feel like, I agree with you if this is about you trying to push something that gets rejected. But if somebody's asking a question, why not get into
Is this for me? Excellent. I think it's two different situations, because I think what Mina was describing sounds a little bit different than what you're describing. And so my honest answer is I have to think about it for a little bit, because I think your question is, so if someone asks me a question, the premise is that I won't answer it for some fear or something else. And then based on that premise, why wouldn't I answer it? I'm following along correctly?
Yeah. I'm just saying that if my student asks me a question and I know the answer and I don't want to answer it, that seems to be selfish. It's like I want to keep something for myself. Now, You can argue why they're asking. That's a different story. But for now, I'm assuming that you're asking to find out.
Mhm. So I'm having a little bit of a tough time with the question only because I don't know. I can't think of that many times. I mean, maybe I did it earlier right now, but where I was asked a question and I didn't want to give my answer because I was scared. I think a lot of the times if I don't answer, it's because I have to think about something.
So I'm gonna follow up now. Good. So that's actually about you. Why are you thinking about it? Because you may give the wrong answer, because you didn't think enough about it, because you are self-conscious of people thinking that whatever answer you're going to give is sort of wrong. Is that the reason?
Yeah, it could be any of those.
It could be.
I also think it's just sometimes taking an extra second to think about things usually helps.
An extra second is fine, but you know, not you know, sort of an extra week. But no, I actually want to follow with this because this is very important. This actually you're getting there now. So imagine I'm talking to my student. I always go back to what I do. And imagine my student is asking me a question, and I'm this big professor, you know, big shot, whatever. And you know, I don't quite know the answer. I can go check the textbooks, but it's going to take me next meeting's in a week. That kills the discussion. That just stops it because, well, I don't know. Actually, I do know. I may have a guess. I could be wrong. So the question is, do I want to engage and expose my uncertainty? So in other words, you can answer. He says, well, I haven't thought about it, but you know, here's how we can start talking about it. And to me, I feel that's, and I think that's a level of trust that you have. This is the big relationship between a student and the advisor, is that level of trust. At the beginning, when students are just coming and it's my first meeting, I have no trust in them, they have no trust in me. So there is not this sort of openness about exposing each other's vulnerability, sort of my ignorance about some things. I mean, I make mistakes all the time, but I'm comfortable with that with somebody because I know then I'm going to take my end. It's a discussion now. Now so they can ask me again and I can change my opinion. So maybe what you are saying is there's not enough opportunities for me to be open up because I feel the discussion is very transactional. Like I ask, the answer now is recorded for history and that's it. Think about it. That's a little bit of a sort of that would shut off any discussion. You know, if you really want to think about everything you want to say. Do you agree with that or not?
I see what you mean.
But you don't agree.
It's not that I don't agree or do agree. I just okay. Forgive me. Does it come across as curt if I say I agree and then don't elaborate? Because I feel like we're having a little bit. I feel like you guys are having a tough time with me for that. But I'm not trying to be curt. I understood what you said. I took it in. Makes sense. I maybe don't have anything to elaborate on.
No, that's fine. I mean, I was just commenting on the fact that you
It's
say
not fine. No, it's not fine.
no, it's fine. Why?
It's not. No, here's
So
why.
ask a question now that we'll practice this.
No. Here's the reason why it's not fine. Because I think the safety question that you posed, where not every conversation is safe, right? Is a brilliant one. And I think that, you know, Anthony and I forget if it was in the mustache conversation or just sort of offline, like, you know, just between him and I, always bring up this book, Crucial Conversations, that we read together like years ago.
I had to read it to deal with a colleague of mine, so you know I know exactly that book.
It's brilliant, right? And one of the central tenets of, you know, Crucial Conversations is safety, and getting a sense that the conversation is unsafe, you know, is an invitation to reflect on what's making it unsafe. And if someone feels like, no, like I can't speak up, that is not their problem. That's our problem, right? Like if I'm talking to Anthony and all of a sudden he mentions something and I clam up and I'm like, and he senses that, he might say, you know, what happened? I'm like, I don't want to talk right now. And he's like, okay, that's not like Mina. Like Mina is usually going to be able to, you know, respond to something, and, you know, not responding is really, you know, indicative that there's an issue that maybe we'll bring back another time, right? But just because not every conversation is safe doesn't mean that every conversation is unsafe. And I hope that this is a safe conversation for Alex. And it's not like, oh, well, you know, they don't care because we do. And it's not like he doesn't have anything to say, because he does. But there's still this block, right? And it's easier just to say, no, I agree, get off my back, than it is to say, well, I agree with this part of it, and I have this concern. Or, you know what? I did change my mind and I have no reservations. And this is why I didn't say this before when you asked me, right? But there's always more there than just, yeah, that's fine. So, Alex, do you feel safe?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Like, other than me threatening to come to your
Oh,
house?
no, that's totally fine. That's actually, that encourages a feeling of safety.
Good. So, if you feel safe and you have something to say, either, hey, you're right, I changed my mind, or, you know, I'm not quite there yet, but I see where you're going, why respond with just, yeah, no, I see that?
I didn't have any contentions. It sounded like I'm on board for if someone asks you a question, and it's, I mean, you guys, I think you and Anthony talked about like discerning other people's intentions, and then I think you guys kind of concluded that it's really, really tough to tell. So you guys said focus on your own intentions. So I think aside from that, if someone's asking you a question and you maybe have an answer, or maybe you don't have a complete answer, but you have the beginning of an answer and you're interested in discussing, you can give what you have. Seems okay to me. I didn't really add anything. I just relayed his point, and then also at the end said I agree. I hope. I mean, I don't know if that made you.
So I mean, I think to Alex's credit, I mean, okay, this is a little high level philosophical discussion. We really don't have a question other than the initial point about sort of, you know, what I feel is missing a little bit is the Q&A sort of opportunities for the church, and just find out about how people are thinking. And it's not part of our culture, and I grew up with that. This is not, you know, the church here or any in the US, or even, I think it's just cultural. And, you know, honestly, let me just say that it's difficult even for, you know, when you go even with the Americans and you don't want to talk about politics and you don't want to talk about religion typically, because these two things are people are not comfortable about them. But when you start knowing people and so on, questions, you know, and then you discover, and then becomes a very sort of, so I think, I mean, I'm actually delighted to hear that Alex says, you know, if asked, I'll answer. I think that's, or at least I'll, and I think just not to be conservative with having to wait until you have the right answer, because I think the whole point of asking a question is maybe to change your opinion, or you to change somebody else's opinion, and that has to, it cannot be, you cannot have that reservation about sort of how people think about the answer. That self-consciousness is hard. Actually, while we were talking, I was just trying to think about in the Bible whether, you know, what were the instances where Jesus didn't want to answer a question, or and I think that there are actually examples, right? So when he was put on they ask me, are you the Son of God? And he didn't answer, I said, you said so. It's almost like, because he knew that he already answered that question. So for example, I can appreciate, somebody not answering the question if the question is asked, was answered, and it was asked again. It's almost like the person doesn't accept your answer. Then I can understand why, well, I'll think about it. I don't want to talk about it. So I think I also want to sort of make sure that that's part of it. Asking the same question and answering it 15 times is, then at some point says, well, I'm not going to answer. So you know what I'm going to say. So what's the point? So I think that's another part. It then gets people to sort of close, right? Does it make sense? Silence is deafening.
I'll ask a question in between, although Alex, please feel free to jump in. But no, one of the things you mentioned was the culture earlier. And I think a lot of this is a journey and an evolution. And I'll speak for myself, like my approach to discussion. I'm comfortable one-on-one with pretty much everyone, but within the larger group settings, I'm more hesitant. And so what were some turning points for you in finding that, or that self-discovery, where it may have changed your approach or helped you recalibrate?
Who's that question for, Anthony?
Azer, but I'm hesitant to say his name without a.
Come on, Azer. Thank you. Well, I don't know if it's. I see what you say. It's more. Maybe it's safer. It's more comfortable on the one-on-one, and then it gets bigger. I think for me, and I hate to keep saying this, but it's actually also my job, right? So I get involved in group meetings, and I can't just have all my discussion with my one student. So I mean, and sort of you learn to expose a little bit of vulnerability, and it's okay. I think part of it is seeing my dad, who was also a very lawyer and very sort of great servant in the church, where he also led sort of a group of like-minded young time professional folks who served the church in very different ways than typical. And I think one thing that maybe colored me a little bit is the fact that people did want to hear from my dad. So actually, he was always what people look up to. So they want to find out how he thinks about this. So and I think that maybe trained me, or at least that to me became something that I'm used to seeing, and I didn't. And granted, as I get older, and that I teach, and so on, these things become part of. You go into meetings, and I'm sure in your case, corporate setting, in my case, in university setting, you're almost forced to say your opinion, right? I mean, you're sitting in a meeting, and there's like 5 people, and you're just okay. We have to decide one way or the other, which way is it going to be. So I think it just comes with, you build confidence. I think a lot of it has to do with how you feel about the community you're in. I think it's that notion of safety, trust, whatever you want to call it. And what I learned is that you only develop that trust through involvement. It doesn't come automatic. You just have to know who you work with. And I think that's part of the difficulty in our churches, as I go back to that point, which is we just don't have enough opportunities for people to develop that bond where they feel they can let their guard down and sort of beyond one-on-one. One-on-one is a little easier because it's one person, I know them. And so I don't know if this answers your question, but I don't know, part of it is age, part of it is um, practice, actually, in a way.
Yeah, that's something I have been reflecting on in terms of my approach. Like I'm sitting here watching Alex get asked all these questions, and I feel like I can relate in a lot of ways. I think though we are raised in a certain culture in a certain way where you almost have to break out of a lot of these things, where you're forced to develop them, or you find a mentor that has an approach that resonates. So for me, I think like watching Mina's approach has made me more comfortable over the years, because it's like, what's the worst that'll happen? But yeah, that was just something I was reflecting on, Alex, is that maybe it's something like an evolution.
Can I share with you something that's sort of from when I first came to this country, I came to study, and literally just plucked out of Alexandria, sort of community there, and Alexandria University, and put in the dorms at Harvard. Just think about that, and I'll tell you where this actually developed. Now I can sort of relate to a particular part of my life, which was graduate life in a graduate dorm, where every day I have to cook for myself and go sit and eat with a bunch of other people that are from all over the world, who share zero view in terms of culture or religion or politics or anything else, or values. And you realize you have a choice. The choice is to engage with them, talk, whatever they talk about. It's not even me to discuss it, and or not. And I think what I realize is, unless you do that, unless you sort of learn how to engage with people and sort of listen to things that are very, very different than yours, and be able to also say things that will be very different than what they think, you basically get discounted. In other words, you cease to be a person of value to them. So if you think about me in a class, neither the faculty nor the other students would listen to me unless I'm also be more like that, like engage with them and so on. So I think part of it, it goes back to the experience and the opportunities for developing this talent. And I tell you that it took a couple of years. It's not easy. You start discussing something with somebody, say, well, go read this book and then come talk to me, because you didn't read the book. So you just have to realize I can't just throw some answer out there. So I agree that there's a little bit of that, especially for people who are first generation or just coming. But I think for others, and I think I see that with my own kids, it's sort of, that's not the case. They have to deal with this day in, day out life. It has nothing to do with the church. And the question is, why is our church not sort of helping develop that, or being sort of realizing that that's actually in real life, that's going to be the case.
So as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about conversations that I've had with people that are very similar to the unfortunate scenario that Alex is concerned is always the case, where you're talking and it's just pointless. Like, there's no reason to have this conversation, because you're going to say something, they're going to say something, and at the end of the day, everybody leaves thinking the same thing that they thought when the conversation started. And I've had those. Like, those are really challenging conversations. And I think Alex alluded to this, where Anthony and I kind of came to the conclusion, well, just don't be that person in the conversation, right? Try to approach every conversation with a genuine interest in trying to understand what the other person is saying. And I think the two categories are people approaching a conversation with a question and people approaching a conversation with an answer. And I'm guilty as charged. I think, you know, there's plenty of conversations that I've approached with an answer where there's no question here in my mind. Like, you know, and I'm not going to bring up issues from 2020 because I'm trying to put that behind me. But, you know, things related to how the Coptic Church was doing communion, questions related to, you know, why wearing a mask, you know, has anything to do with who you're voting for president. Why, you know, we have to believe that everyone in the church is perfect in order for the church to be a community that's beneficial to be a part of. Like, we can say people in the church make mistakes at all levels, and we can still have a community that's worth salvaging, right? And I'm guilty. I'm guilty that I had strong opinions on these things, and have, like, not had, have strong opinions. And I think I learned over the last year that maybe Alex is right about certain situations where, like, I'm not approaching the conversation with a question. I'm not approaching the conversation with an answer. Like, no, I'm not going to discuss this. Like, there's nothing to discuss. And I had this experience with someone early on saying, oh, well, why don't we just do herd immunity? And it's like, you don't even know what that is. And you're an educated person that should know what it is. And most people would engage in a conversation with you, but I'm not. And I just kind of went, okay. And they said, don't you think? And I said, no, I don't think. And they said,
But Mina, to me, it sounds like you stopped the conversation because there was nothing. That's different than going in with an answer.
I mean, I didn't want, I can picture where I was, like the time of day, the person, like I've got it like ingrained in my mind, it's really like it's emblazoned on my memory that was the moment where I was like, nope, I'm not having this conversation. Because they said, don't you think? And I said, no, I don't think. And they're like, well, why not? I'm like, I don't really want to discuss it. And I just didn't want to discuss it because I'm not going to sit there and start from scratch to explain to this person that, no, we have to protect the vulnerable. No, we have to wear masks. No, we have to be careful. Like, they've already made up their mind that they don't feel like they can be bothered with any kind of precautions. They just want to do whatever they want to do. Hey, go do whatever you want to do. But there's a difference between that and other conversations with people last year that we may have disagreed a lot about certain things, but we're both genuinely struggling with the same question, trying to understand, no, what do you think? Yeah, I mean, this is what I thought before, but now, like, it turns out like we have new data that suggests otherwise. And I feel like we're constantly trying to make sense of the world in a way that is a little clearer than yesterday, but still a work in progress. So I think that, and coming back to Alex's problem, I think I have the same problem. And I think I assume the opposite of Alex. Alex assumes every conversation, everybody's already got an answer. Don't worry about it. And I used to think that everyone is really approaching every conversation with a question. And I realized, like, no, first of all, that's not true. A lot of people are approaching conversations with an answer, no real discussion. And sometimes I'm that person. Sometimes I'm the one that comes to a conversation with an answer. And maybe it's not because the other person's not willing to listen, but maybe I'm not willing to listen, nor should I be with certain things. So now that we've discussed a little bit, I mustache you something. Or actually, should I do this? I mustache you something. How do you figure out if the conversation is one that is exploring a question, or if it's a conversation where, you know, everybody's coming with an answer, and with the possibility that you might be the person that's already coming with an answer, and that's okay. I don't suppose we can start with Alex.
First, I had like 4 thoughts, so I'm worried about talking because I don't want to derail the universe. One of the thoughts was, you know, let's say that you're going in with a question or you're going in with an answer, you know, do you participate in the conversation anyway, right? Because there may be a possibility that, you know, you went in with an answer or they came in with an answer, and at the end it was beneficial for you both. You know, is that possible? So do you have the conversation anyway? But I think your question was, how do we navigate it, right? Which is a sooner question. So I'm not 100% sure on my thoughts on that one yet. So if you want to give me a minute.
Sure, you can have a month. We'll just sit here and wait. Anthony?
Just my initial thought was asking the clarifying question of trying to identify the goal of the discussion, like the examples you mentioned earlier. But I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, I mean, so it's possible that I was wrong. Like, let's take that example of the herd immunity, you know, ridiculous conversation. It's possible that the person was willing to be educated, right? It's possible they would have been receptive to it. And I was just exhausted. Like, I was just, khalas, is it? Like, I'm tired of explaining like basic things to people that, like, you know, aren't worth explaining if at the end of the conversation, like, I've invested all of this heartache. But you're right. Like, maybe I should have asked, like, are you really asking, or have you already made up your mind that herd immunity is the way, and for me to talk any kind of sense into you is going to be a complete waste? So I think that's a fair question. What else do you have in mind?
Well, one thing you said too is you were exhausted and potentially not in the right state of mind to have the discussion. I think that's also important to consider, that we, like, I personally, like, if I'm angry every time I've spoken, I've always regretted it. And so you may have a point that's worth making, but it could cause more damage in the process.
I'm having a trouble with the premise that you approach every discussion either with a question or an answer. Actually, so let's assume that you and I are getting into a discussion and I know your answer ahead of time and you know my answer ahead of time. Actually, there's a question, and the question is, are you willing to change your mind or your answer? Am I willing to change my answer? So I think it's a meta question, right? I mean, when I go discuss something with my kids, it's not like I don't know what they're thinking. Of course I do. Of course, there could be, I mean, somebody random on the street, sure, I don't know. But I'm assuming that we're beyond that, right? So there is a sort of a context. So I don't know if it's that binary. It's not like really like that. It's just finding out more and just peeling one more layer. So I could know exactly your answer, and you may know my answer. But the discussion is really about telling each one of us more about sort of if there is a resolution, if there is a way to get a little closer, then that's where the purpose of discussion is. Now, I think this is what Anthony said. I think he's right. You don't want to go into a discussion where you know the answer of the other side and they know your answer when you are tired or when you are lost patience or whatnot, because that backfires and you'll probably regret it. This is when people start yelling at each other. So I think that's so I'm not sure I think it's fair to say that you sort of go into the discussion with an open mind that even if the other side has an answer, they are generally interested in just iterating one more time. I just have to assume that about any discussion. You can't approach a discussion well, if I approach a discussion knowing that the person on the other side is just trying to entrap you or anything, I just don't do it. It's fine. And so I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like it's pretending that I don't know even the answer of the other side just to get them to say it is also not genuine. In other words, for me, I know how the other person thinks. I don't have to put them through the hoops to say it again. I know this is what you're thinking. Let's go beyond that. So I don't know about that part.
And I think it's possible to have a good relationship with people that you don't like. The person who I said, no, I'm not having this herd immunity discussion. I still see this person, oh, hey, how are you? We're just not going to bring up herd immunity again. And the same thing, like, you know, with all of the issues that I mentioned, like people in our community that have a very rigid, fixed opinion on how to do certain things that, I mean, there's no way I'm ever going to agree. There's no way. There's no chance I'm ever going to agree. And that's okay. I love this person. I respect this person. We're never going to agree on this point. Khalas. Like Anthony said, like, you know, even if I, like, for example, like, even if I'm not tired, I'm not upset. We're not necessarily going to get anywhere discussing this thing. And if the only thing that's going to happen is that we're going to get frustrated with the conversation or frustrated with each other, I don't see a point. So I don't think every conversation is worth having, but again, bringing back to the conversation earlier, just because not every conversation is worth having doesn't mean that no conversations are worth having.
Well, but I'm going to be now so get on your case a little bit. So I'll be the one who wants to push the herd immunity argument, just to see how you react to it. Just give me the chance to get to my point. It takes two to tango. It's okay if you and I disagree and I don't want to talk about it and you don't want to talk about it. I can understand that. Then we shouldn't. Like, you know, my kids and I, there are things, okay, we disagree, let's just stop it here. And I think we have a great life otherwise. But what if I keep bugging you? In other words, I haven't given up. You may. I actually think that it's not fair for you to say I don't want to talk about it.
No, I could.
You do, and I think there is an element here of patience, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy.
No, listen. If you insisted on having, like, if I said no, I don't want to talk about it, and you're like, no, I really want to talk about it, I would say, okay, explain to me why you really want to talk about it. Because the person just dropped it on the spot. Like I said, no, I don't agree, and no, I don't want to talk about it. And they said, okay. And that to me is indicative that, like,
yeah, fine, that's good. I have no problem with that. But let's imagine that somebody truly believes in some science, whatever crappy it is, that the earth is flat, and they want to now sort of engage in that discussion. Look, I've had things like that, and there are much more deeper issues, you know, with even beliefs and you know, things that are deep and important, right? And I think that deny. So, you know, and you and I actually discussed this at some point. I think it was actually in one of the Sunday school discussions we had. One of the things that I say violently react to, not violently, but is when somebody says you cannot ask that question. That is something that just I cannot accept. But what do you mean you cannot ask it? Of course, I can ask any question I want. You may not know the answer. It may cause you to be very uncertain. It may make me very uncomfortable, right? But you cannot tell me I cannot ask the question. And I think that that's when you shut somebody off, say, well, I don't want to talk about it. That's basically saying you cannot ask the question. So if somebody wants to ask a question about the earth being flat, you cannot tell them you cannot ask the question. You can be very impatient. You can be very uncomfortable. You may, right? And you may decide to say, well, you know, maybe now Alex is right. I have to think about it and get back to you. Maybe that's the right approach to do it. But I take issue a little bit with this because I think that's at the heart of why we don't have enough discussions. It's because maybe we don't want the questions to be asked. I have experienced this again amongst friends, but I know this is on YouTube, it's fine. At a young age, I sort of was part of, teaching Sunday school and so on, and we're, a team of us teachers, preparing lessons. And sometimes, the teacher cannot agree on exactly what to say, right? And the question is, so what happens now? Do I just take whatever other teacher says this is what you should say, or just to make peace? Or, if we disagree, do we expose this disagreement in front of our students? I want to talk about third grade and fourth grade. I'm talking about high school and college. And I've gone through this. I've gone through it with dear people in the church, and nothing, where it's very uncomfortable. But you can't just stop and say, well, okay, let's not do it then. You can't do that. And I have been in situations where co-servants would say, you cannot ask that question. You cannot put that question on the table. What's that? This is difficult, right? And I think that part of the reason we don't have enough within our church of these discussions is we're uncomfortable with some of the difficult questions. And my point is, like anything else, we need to get trained. It's not going to start automatically. So what are we doing to start with simple questions, easier questions? This is why I find, for example, discussing history is always nice. You can't argue with history. It just happened, and this is what it is. So look back at our history, and then we can, from that, maybe we can build more acceptance to some things. Anyway, I talk too much. But
I think, I mean, that was part of the reason that I brought up this, question and answer dichotomy. Not because I think I agree with you. There's blurriness and, there's, vagueness. And I think exploring a conversation to see if it's a conversation where we're really wrestling with questions. But that's kind of where I was coming from, is that a lot of Sunday school lessons, a lot of Sunday school conversations, a lot of church conversations, that's the answer best. Yani, we're not here to discuss, we're here to teach, and we give the kids the answer and khalas. And when I bring up, like you said, well, this is an important question, and I'm told you're not allowed to ask that question, I responded with, there's no such thing as a heretical question, right? There may or may not be heretical answers, right? We might say, listen, there's no requirement to be Christian, but if you're going to consider yourself to be Christian, then, this is the category of acceptable answers. To say, I disagree with this, fine, but that still doesn't align with what we believe as Christians. To say, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in God, it's like, I mean, no, that's a fundamental premise of being Christian. So there are things that are considered to be, orthodox answers.
It's actually also okay to say there is no answer. We just don't know.
Right.
Or everybody can think about whatever answer they. I mean, I think that and I think that's actually more cultural than anything. Growing up in Egypt, going to schools in Egypt, every question had an answer. Every question had an answer. You go to the textbook, you go ask somebody, they'll give you an answer. And I think that's something that needs to change a little bit. That some things we don't just know the answer, or there may be multiple answers. We'll know which one is right, and that's okay, and that's fine. And I think our tendency, the reason not to ask the question is because we don't have an answer, but then, or at least the answer, we are ourselves not convinced with it. So sort of, how do you answer something? Or you see contradictions in sort of even earlier opinions. And I think this is not bad. This is okay. And I think that we should treat each other and sort of the community as should train in that, because the fact that saying you cannot ask the question the question doesn't go away, certainly from the person asking it. And not having an answer is a perfect answer, actually. In science, we know that there are some questions in science that we don't have an answer for. It doesn't mean that science is bad, or for that math or physics, right? So I don't know why we should shy away from exposing a little bit of that we don't know, or we may disagree. Even within the church, it's okay. St. Paul and St. Peter disagreed in the very first It's exposed. You can read it about it, right? So what the church became stronger because of that, not anyway.
What if someone either consciously or subconsciously, whether they say this out loud or based on their actions, like it's pretty clear that this is what's happening, is that they're afraid that if we don't have all the answers, then khalas, the house of cards comes crashing down, and we're going to lose our credibility, and we have to maintain the party line and say, no, we've got all the answers, come get your answers here, comprehensive answers to all questions as they come, answers.
I don't buy it. I think it's the opposite.
That's what we see. We see that on every level.
I think it's, I'll tell you, it's, I hope these words are not strong, but I mean, they don't, that people don't take them the wrong way. I think it's actually insulting to the people that you are the community to say that I have to have all the answers. You underestimate their intelligence. I think that's the bottom line. So if I pretend to have all the answers to my kids, that basically says that I think they're not intelligent enough, right? So I think that it's condescending actually to say that. So I think, to me, I feel that this attitude is an attitude of not having enough trust in our community to appreciate that it's okay not to know and to think, and God wants us to ask for guidance and to get whatever answer, which in 10 years may be different. It's okay. The church has changed so much in terms of how we answered many questions. That is not a bug, it's a feature. It's what I keep saying, the evolution is in the way we think is very different. Not that anything before was wrong. It's just that, okay, here, I mean, I don't turn this into a theology thing, but think about the relationship between God and his people in the Old Testament to the New Testament today. It's an evolution from the Ten Commandments to, I mean, the stories in the Old Testament speak for themselves, right? That's not the New Testament. And then it's basically like somebody dealing with a kid who's growing, and you grow and you learn more. Why is that stopping? Why it didn't stop with 2,000 years before Christ? It's not going to stop 2,000 years after Christ. It's an evolution, it's a relationship, right? So, and to say that all the answers were there, no, they were not. And to say that all the answers are now and we know exactly is not right either. So I feel like this position of saying, we don't want to get into this because, the house of cards is going to go down. Well, the house of cards didn't go down for thousands of years. And let's just forget a little bit about religion, think about science. The house of cards of science doesn't go down. You change your opinion all the time, and people understand it's part of it, right? So I feel like it's just it's unfortunate, but yeah, I know exactly what you're coming from. I heard that before, but I don't agree with it.
One thing that is coming to mind is a book that I read recently that was recommended to me by Maggie Mitri. So Maggie has a master's in education, and she asked me to read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I don't know if you guys have read this, but it's absolutely brilliant. And he talks about two different types. So this is Paulo Freire. And he talks about two different types of education. One where the teacher has the answers and is giving the students, the answers. And basically it's this banking model of like, the teacher is the banker and, is giving the students, the tidbits of knowledge, and you're lucky to be here so you can learn from me. And the other model, which is the one that he favors, obviously, is the problem-based, where we're both oriented towards the same problem. And it's like, listen, I've been struggling with this problem for 30 years. Let me share with you how far along I've come. And then you can share with me in struggling with this problem together. So instead of I know the answers and you need the answers that I have, no, it's us together wrestling with this thing. And I've just been wrestling with it longer. So, you know, you have something potentially to learn from me on how I'm wrestling with this question, but I also have something to benefit from you because maybe you're coming with a fresh perspective. And I think that a lot of times in our community, it's a banking model of spirituality. Of the church has some spirituality to dispense, and you show up, okay, you get a barakah here, and you get a barakah there, and you know you get this and you get that. It's like, where's God in all this? Instead of, hey, we are all in this together, seeking after God, and God is the one that bestows the gifts on all of us. Alex,
well, I think by
please
definition,
stop talking, Alex.
Sorry, could you repeat what you said? I didn't hear it.
I asked you to please stop talking and to keep it down and give Azer a chance to talk, okay?
Yeah, I got it, of course. I would never tread. Wouldn't want to overstep.
Thank you. Azer, please, let's give you an opportunity so you don't have to talk over Alex.
I just did, so now I was gonna say the term communion means what? It means sharing, and sharing in discovery. So maybe different phases of it, but it's all about sort of a journey of faith, and it really isn't about the bank where you go get an answer. It's really about sharing.
And I mean, that's the question of what kind of community do we want to be? Do we want to be a community that participates and works together? And, you know, the word liturgy comes from the Greek word for the work of the people. So, you know, are we getting together to work together? Like, is this, or, you know, is this a barakah dispensing machine? And we're not here to work. We're here to just be passively thrown at some blessing. You know, and I think there's an opportunity for us to understand that this is a struggle. This is an ongoing communal group struggle for us to say, I have not yet attained and I press on, and let's do this together. Let's keep trying to work through things together. And the assumption that, alas, we've got the answers and come get the answers. I think that's why, you know, with all respect, Alex, I love you. That's why we end up with attitude of, oh, well, just tell me the answer.
I want to ask another question. Maybe Alex and Anthony can get more into this. I actually have a feeling that the problem we have is not that people like Alex, or I don't know, Anthony as much, but you know, my guess is also he's not forthcoming with lots of answers. It's because they're not asked the questions. So let me turn it around and say, do you agree that there's, well, do you find enough opportunities to be asked questions and say them, other than Nina bringing us on YouTube together? It's like amongst family, in Sunday school, community with friends. In other words, you know, it's one thing to say, well, you're not asking the questions, or you're always sort of passive or whatnot. That's what I'm hearing. But maybe that's because actually no real interesting questions have been asked. You're not put in a position where you feel like there is a question.
Right. The question of, have we created a environment that is open to being questioned and for people to contribute creatively to the answers? I would say 100% no.
I would disagree and say we've created micro environments that allow for that. And that's where I start to wonder, like in any big organization, I think it's about the micro a lot of the times and how we might be able to make a change on an individual level versus the church. Now, I obviously don't have the same experience in terms of like some of the questions you've been faced with in different settings. But yeah, I think that's where the change occurs. And I don't think it exists.
You don't think we could do this on an institutional level to operationalize it?
With where we are today, no.
Hypothetically?
I'll get a little controversial, but so I think in any large, my answer is no. The reason being, I think there's a continuum. You're going to have churches, so you're going to have groups within a church that are going to be open to this sort of thing and others that aren't. You're going to have churches from a broader sense. And then from a church perspective, like I think the real change has to trickle down and up. So I don't think on a full level we can.
Alex?
I want to say hypothetically, sure, why not? But then my next thing in my head is, what does it look like? And I'm not sure what it would look like. Where we have institutions as a whole that are comfortable asking each other questions. Because I think the whole thing we've been debating the whole time is we have one model that we're familiar with that's like there's an answer for everything, and we either when we asked a question, we were discouraged from asking the question because it was dumb or for whatever reason, or it was outside of the scope of the stuff we already know, and we were uncomfortable with anything outside of that scope. And then there's the other model where, okay, let's say hypothetically, we're comfortable with the idea that we don't know everything and that we can ask questions and that we're safe to ask questions. Anthony was saying we can do it on the micro level. That's not that complicated, where like maybe you have one or two people that you can talk to ask stuff. It's got that safety net, but then what does that look like as an institution? So is that just like our whole Sunday school is now comfortable, like K through 12 or whatever, like we let them ask questions for all the churches?
I mean, I think in the very least, on a parish level, each parish is committed to saying to the kids, like, hey, like, every question is a good question. In the very least, like, I think that is like the lowest hanging fruit, where, Sunday school teachers are encouraged to say, I don't know. Let me look that up. Let's learn together. Not, that's a stupid question, or we already went over this, or any kind of deflection or discomfort that doesn't reflect a genuine concern for the student and for the teacher to consider him or herself to also be a student, to say, hey, that's a good question, I don't know the answer, I should know myself. I think that's, I mean, to me, I don't know how it could be beneficial to have a Sunday school program that doesn't approach it that way. We're better off not having Sunday school than having a Sunday school where تعالى أنعلمك احنا نفهمك. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, Sunday school should be all about the mutual exploration, should be all about, hey, this is my lesson to myself that I'm sharing with you. And should never be, oh, well, now I've got it figured out, like, let me show you something. Like, خليك في البيت أحسن. Like, you're better off not teaching Sunday school than if you're teaching it with that attitude. So I I think I obviously have some strong opinions on this, and I unfortunately, I can't strongly disagree with Anthony, right? Like the question of utility, possibility, practicality, I don't know. But should we? Absolutely, we should.
So I want to. So I think that I actually would agree with Anthony that it happens one-on-one, small groups, but then sort of taking it to the institution or sort of bigger than that is a harder. And if it is hard, and I agree it is hard, you don't have to ask why. So let's talk about Sunday school. Okay. You know, if the question you want to discuss in Sunday school is a controversial one or one that is sort of get people upset, then it's never going to happen. So maybe what we should find out is, are there questions we can discuss as a way to train our community? See, I think of it as a training exercise. I mean, we are doing zero of it, or maybe a little of it, and want to get a little bit more. Don't start with something you know is going to be hard. Let's not just start by discussing whether or not should fast 9 hours before communion or else you'll go to hell or something like that. One of these things, right? So let's not go there. Can we find something we can discuss that is actually we don't know the answers to? It has to be that, right? Because if you already have the answer, then unfortunately we'll say, well, but this is the church's answer. We already have an answer. So can we find something that there is no answer for? Like we know the church doesn't have an answer, okay? As in the Pope and the priests and everybody. And it could be some.
No, they have an answer to everything.
No, I don't think so, because I can give you answer. I'll ask a question about science, okay, so they don't have an answer.
Oh no, they have all of those answers.
Well, fine.
They have all of the answers.
Nina, give me a break. Let me finish my point.
But that's, I mean, so if
no. Let's talk about politics. They have a question about should it be $2 trillion of help to the American people or $1 trillion?
No, you just vote for Trump and then whatever happens happens.
I think his point is just that like sometimes it isn't about whether or not we actually have the answer. It's about if we perceive to have the answer, right? So having these discussions can be very, very difficult if we think we already know everything.
So I'm trying to say, let's start with something where the likelihood of people saying I have an answer is low.
I haven't had the experience where that applies to anything. You can ask, so tell me.
I think it'll be unfair, but fine. Okay, I can disagree with you. And I tell you, we can find this just as hypothetical even. And my point is, unless we try that, then we are not going to go beyond the two of us or the four of us talking here to something that's a little bigger. So I'll give you an example that happened, and I can attest to that, in Egypt. Again, history is always good. So while you may not have discussions about what's good, something about, that is more spiritual or this or that, how about financial questions? How about a question about, should we build the church to last for, we bought a plot of land and want to buy, I mean, this happened actually in my life back in Egypt about a new cathedral they want to build in Alexandria, and there were multiple opinions. There's no right or wrong, the whole point is to find an answer. And then the process was, well, let's get into a discussion with the community and blah, blah, blah. So it opened up that. And I think, can't we find something that even the leadership of the church doesn't have a good answer for amongst themselves? They disagree. So let's start with that. And my point is, unless we get into an exercise where we practice, it's almost like practicing democracy. You really have just to practice it. And unless we practice this and kids see us practice it and we see ourselves doing it, and we understand that, well, we did our best and everybody did their opinion, we're not going to be able to tackle the bigger questions. It's almost like, you don't train people in, modern physics in first grade. You take them first through, math and a little bit of calculus, and you keep going. And then at some point they're ready to do this. And I think what I'm trying to say is our community doesn't have even the elementary level sort of capacity to engage in these sort of discussions where you expose yourself a little bit. And going back to Anthony's point about I want to talk to, he asked me, so how do you get to talk from one-on-one to talk to a group? Don't know the people. Well, if it's about life and death decisions, maybe I will not do it. But if it's about something that's a little less controversial, maybe we'll do it. So can't we maybe start with something like that? I don't know.
So here's the flaw in your premise. I think we all have the same problem of thinking that we are the centrists on any spectrum. And if you're driving on the highway and you've decided to go this speed, somebody going 3 miles an hour faster is a maniac. Someone going 3 miles an hour slower, I mean, they're brain dead. Like, I can't believe this person. And this isn't a clergy problem. This is a human problem. And if your question is, can you find something that the clergy disagree with each other on? Yeah, plenty. But if your question is on an individual person, clergy or otherwise, are they willing to recognize that it's an open question? No. So if you and I are discussing something, we respect each other. Like I think, I thought X, Azer's telling me Y, I should really reconsider X. And maybe we have a conversation and we can agree on Z. But if we have a hierarchical system where Azer is above Mina, and because Azer says Y, Mina can decide if he wants to be wrong with X or he wants to fall in line and believe Y with Azer. That's the system that we have. Where your position is and the shape of the hat that you wear is the one that dictates whether reality is X or Y. And if God forbid you don't have a hat, like, I don't even know why. Like, you should be listening to somebody with a hat to tell you, what shoe to tie first. So again, I get what you're saying. Do they disagree with each other? Sure. Are they going to think that disagreement means that there's an existential reality outside of their own opinion? No. And this is not every individual, of course. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. And of course, there's clergy that are very open-minded. Of course. I'm not saying that this is a blanket statement, but the prevailing culture amongst everyone at every level, there's high.
Nina, let me disagree with you on one thing. Actually, there's no disagreement in what you said, fine. But why are we bringing the clergy into this? My point had nothing to do with the clergy. My point was about the community, right? I have no hat and no shape of a hat, and none of 4 of you, and Sunday school servants don't have hats. And so in other words, I understand the cultural and history.
Because in order for us to operationalize this, in order for this to become an institutional mandate, in order for this to go outside of the realm of the interstitial and go into the realm of the institutional, it has to involve the clergy. So it has to. So when Anthony says, no, it can't become institutionalized, it cannot become operationalized, I'm reading between the lines to say the church hierarchy is not going to get on board. Yes, you can do it amongst each other. Yes, you can do it at a level of a Sunday school class. If you're lucky, if you have the right combination of priests and servants, you can do it at a parish level. You cannot do it. At the level of the Coptic Church, because there's going to be too much institutional resistance, because the institution wants to have answers, not questions.
I think that's a little pessimistic, but I'm not gonna disagree. I'll say that yes.
I want to be wrong. But let's be realistic here. If I say this, am I more likely to get a call that says, Mina, you have a very good point. let's hear this out and let's figure out at an institutional level how we can better address these concerns so that instead of coming to people with declarations and demands and answers, we can come with a more inquisitive mindset where we're open to having our minds being convinced about something? Or am I more likely to get a phone call that says, what are you talking about? You can't say these things, you're undermining and you're creating problems. And this is, by the way, the most blunt and vocal I've been on these mustache conversations, and I've usually behaved myself for the most part till now. And I say this with all love and all respect and with zero hard feelings and no I appreciate the challenges and the difficulties and like the thanklessness 100%. But at the same time, we have a prevailing culture where we don't like questions, we like answers. And that's not because any individual themselves is creating the problem. No, they're just part of a larger situation. One of the things I learned a few years ago, I guess now, is this concept of critical realist theory, that there are certain social structures that are ingrained and embedded that individuals cannot resist. And I love this example that our professor gave, which is if you put Pope Francis as the CEO of ExxonMobil, it's not going to work, right? You would think, oh, he's an environmentalist, he's a spiritual person, he's going to do a great job. If only, like, they would never pick him, but if they did, man, he would make a huge difference. No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't do it. The way that the organization's designed is to pollute the environment. That's just what they do. So if he did something that was in favor of the environment, that compromised the bottom line of the corporation, he'd get sued by the board of directors and removed. If he happened to inspire them and said, guys, we really have a responsibility here, we got to do the right thing, he and the board of directors would get sued by the shareholders. He can't do it. He can't do it. So there are institutional problems, and there's an institutional inertia that I think Anthony is speaking to that is going to be difficult to resist. And with all love and all respect to all individuals at all levels, I'm asking, shouldn't we? Even if we can't, shouldn't we try?
I'm thinking about this in terms of our roles. And so what can we control versus, or control in quotes, versus thinking about it from an institutional level. Like, I think if this is even successful on a micro level, that's a step in the right direction and having an impact. And then the other piece I am just reflecting on too is people have the choice as well to go to whatever church they connect with. And so within a diocese or within a country even, you might have multiple dioceses. And so I don't even know if that's the plural. But my point being, like, if there's a system or that you connect with more at one church, like that's or a church that's more open, a parish that's more open to change or driving this sort of approach, maybe that's the answer for now. But I think the institutional approach might take generations.
First of all, I agree that it would take generations. And I think Mina and I go back quite a bit about sort of the importance of activism, we may call it that actually activists just have to be patient and realize that it may not happen even for their own kids. I mean, it takes generations. So I think that the difference between being impatient and just bolting off because nothing will work is actually exactly the danger here. And so I agree with that part. But I'm not, I think that Mina, I'm not discounting anything you said, but I think it's a little bit on the pessimistic side because I can also think of things that happened in our history where people did sort of manage to change things by starting sort of a bottom up on something that I mentioned some examples in Majlis al-Milli, the lay councils back in for a long time. They had a big impact, and actually change happened because of that. When you think about elections of the Pope, I mean, these things were not, there were changes that came because people realized there was a problem and they got into discussions. And so I'm not as sort of, well, I think you are absolutely right. There is a cultural, there's societal things, whatever you call it, critical, what was it called? Critical
realist theory.
Realist. I'm not discounting any of that. I'm just saying that unless one is more optimistic, then nothing sort of change. I like to think that change is possible. Yeah, I still pose the same question I said before. Can we train ourselves by not going into the things that we know would be uphill battles? No, I don't know. Maybe there is no question for which we are. And I like very much what Anthony said about people have choice. Certainly have choice, and can go to different churches and talk to different priests. I'm very, very. It was very exciting to see what the Southern Diocese is doing with sort of the American Coptic Orthodox Church, sort of saying, well, within the same diocese, we'll have two services and two types of services, and maybe even different cultures develop. Sunday school may be run differently even. So that's a good example of something. I don't know how it came to happen. I think that you can think about priests who are professionals who can still do their jobs and still serve. I think these are all changes. They're small, perhaps, but so I'm hoping that there could be discussions about things that are, that train the community in being more engaged. I think people are not going to tackle the bigger questions without having successes in sort of smaller ones. But so, Alex, what thing do you think we can bring the community around so that we have more of these exchanges? What would be interesting topics where there is no poison pills? What would be interesting?
That's a huge question, and I like it a lot, although I'm not sure I have an answer. What topics can we bring people together on?
Yeah, so that we can decide, we can train ourselves in hearing each other, developing this trust and this, more than the four of us and more than the people who know each other, and sort of do it as a sort of like a communal exercise.
So Alex, this is number one, something that is controversial enough that it has multiple answers. Number two, not so controversial and not so hot button that people are going to clam up and say, no, 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 I don't want to hear it. No, 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 no. And finally, it doesn't need to be the perfect answer. It just needs to be any answer. So give us the perfect answer in a month. But for now, any answer is good.
Let me make it even a little easier. This particular question I'm asking you is a question we can get the community to help come up with answers for. In other words, it's a meta question, right? So what can we do? What exercise can we, in institutions at BU, that's called strategic planning. So what you go, he says, we're going to come up with a strategic plan in a year. All right. So everybody, think about what questions you want to ask. And you go through this multiple iterations until communally you agree that even though my question was not asked, but I was part of this big discussion that eventually got us to some key principles that we're going to push now institutionally and feel that we're all vested in it. Now, you can argue sometimes that maybe it was all baked and we knew the answer before it started, and this is just, but actually, indeed, when you look at institutions, this exercise of building consensus is very healthy because that's how you develop the discussions and people can trust each other. And if it's really done right, actually good ideas come up from people didn't think about before. Even if at the end you did what you knew you were going to have to do anyway from like a year before, just the exercise itself is healthy. So I think that it will be I would love to participate and listen to what would be interesting questions that the community may want to answer. I have no clue, actually, if you ask me. It could be about politics. It could be about how do we do the next fundraising for Kinonia? I mean, hey, there's lots of questions that shouldn't be controversial, and people can have different opinions about them.
So starting with this question, Alex.
I can only think of nonsense answers, but it's just like safe topics of like food, cooking, sports, recreation.
That would actually be a funny exercise to have a conversation with people in the community. Like, what's the best food? like what's the best recipe for macarona bechamel? Do you put tomato sauce or no tomato sauce? And then like have people kind of like lose their minds, and then present them with two recipes.
We can make it a little bit more controversial. How about what is is doing macarona bechamel with this kind of cream siyami or not? How about that? Sorry, Nina.
I mean, like first, like you dug into my heart with the herd immunity. Oh, let's talk about it. Like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And now we're going to talk about like the reading of the labels. I'm like, like, come on. Like, have we not?
I'm being a troublemaker, Mina, but it's
like, have we not made any progress at all? Like, we're still reading the labels. But Meshi, yeah, no, that's fine. I like I said, my opinions and my tolerances for some of these things are really can't be the like I can't be the arbiter of what.
So let Alex be the arbiter.
Right, absolutely, Alex. If he ever speaks.
I don't know if I'm frozen or not.
No, your
not.
action's been actually much better than your contributions.
Oh, thank you, excellent. So you wanted me to be the arbitrator of what exactly? Which bechamel, or whether or not we read the labels?
Or what topic is worth discussing to give people practice discussing something that's controversial but not so emotional that they can realize, okay, I have the capacity to be open-minded.
I feel like food's easy.
So we engage with conversations about food so that people get practice, thinking about perspectives from other people, thinking about opinions from other people's perspectives.
I don't know. I mean, food is great, but there are lots. How about any current issue that's in the news? I mean, things to do with our society, things to do with our, who should you vaccinate first? Is it the kids to go to school, the elderly to protect them from? Is it underrepresented group or minorities who are doing all the menial jobs, or I mean, I think that's something that I don't think there's an answer. The church doesn't have an answer. Hopefully, nobody will say this is the right answer. And perhaps it exposes some different opinions about what we value.
Actually, you want to hear something interesting? My friend Joe Atea actually just told me. He said every state has been tasked with allocating, the vaccines however they want. And the state of Alaska, and I didn't look this up. I'm not saying that this is something I've verified, but he told me that the state of Alaska has prioritized people who speak indigenous endangered languages. So if you're like one of 10 people in the world that speaks a certain language, they are prioritizing you for the vaccine, because if you die, you've lost 1/10 of the people that speak this language, and you don't want to do that. So it's like an interesting, like you'd never think of that, right? Like there's no way somebody in Washington, D.C. could have ever made that decision. But if it makes sense for that community, and like by and large, people in Alaska are like, oh yeah, that makes sense, then fine. As long as it is perceived as equitable by people, or a significant majority of people, then it's a reasonable idea, right?
If the Coptic Church was running the distribution of the vaccine, what would be the? I mean, I'm not kidding. What I'm trying to say is, it's about training. It's about an exercise. And when you train somebody, you just go hypothetical. Fine. So the Coptic Church now controls the distribution of the vaccine. What is the Coptic? What is the Christian way to do this right? And let's go into the discussion. People have different opinions. I'm not just. We can talk about taxation. We can talk about education. We can talk about things like that. And I think that would this notion of opening up and developing these forums or these opportunities. And maybe it's not the entire church. Maybe it's just the high school. Maybe it's just maybe high school across multiple congregations. Maybe I don't know. I'm just thinking loud. But I feel like I'm going back to what I started with, which is we just don't have enough opportunities to practice as a community. I have a lot of opportunity at BU. You have no idea. I discuss things with social scientists, with this, with that, and I have a ball, and I feel like it's very rich and gives me happiness in my own profession. I wish we do something like that, but sort of is centered more about our spirituality or culture or whatever else we sort of feel unites us.
So was this conversation about asking questions? Because I've been thinking about what to name it. So with Uncle Rafit and Ray and the surprise guest, the conversation was about freedom. Another conversation with another group was about Coptic identity. What's this one about? Alex.
Free speech.
Is it?
I think that's what it started as. It may not be where it ended.
I interpreted it as driving change.
Alex.
Would you like another suggestion, or do you just want my comment?
Sorry to interrupt.
Maybe we need like a training program
just for
on
me.
how to have a conversation.
Just for me, though.
I mean, you can't be the only one.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Honestly, maybe just the conversations. Like we talked about conversations.
I must ask you something about conversations.
dialogue. I don't know. It's,
I must ask you something about dialogue.
it's more like community building. It's almost like developing that. Yeah.
What about,
Conversations that
I
change.
must ask you something about final answers. Because I think we I think we're trying to get, we need to have an answer on what we're going to call it, right? And we recognize that, you know, even if Alex gets a month or a year or 5 years, he's still not going to have an answer, like a final answer, like this is what I think we should call it, right? So I think it would be ironic to call it final answers when I think the conversation is we don't have final answers. And I think we have, you know, ongoing questions that are going to be explored together through conversation, through dialogue, through driving change, as Anthony said. And we're pursuing final answers, right? We're trying to get to a final answer that we might not get to. How do you guys feel about that, Alex?
Did you come up with a, because it sounded like you wrote the description, but I don't know if you came up with the actual title. Did you?
Final answers. I must ask you something about final answers.
I'm fine with it.
And actually, if it's a bonus that it bothers Azer as much as it bothers the fact that I named his Dr. Azer and he wants me to change it and I won't, maybe I'll even call it, I must ask you something about Dr. Final Answers. But I think that would be like I don't mind making jokes that people don't get, but I think that's going to be a little bit too much. So does it bother you that the title is going to be Final Answers, Azer?
it doesn't bother me, but I don't know if it captures. To me, it's like the journey, the sort of the how do we train. No, to me, it's more like questions are the answers.
Right,
In
exactly.
other words, it's really not about sort of answers. It's about the answer may be another question. So another way.
Right, and for the 7 people, maybe 8 sometimes, that listen through the whole thing, right? They get to this point and they're like, are you kidding? I just watched an hour and 53 minutes so that at the end you tell me the final answers are questions? Get out of here. I watched this whole thing looking for final answers and all you're telling me is that the final answers are questions? I hate this thing. I
The
think
final answer is to ask more questions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd have to watch all the way through to get the final answer, which is ta-da, there's no final answer, ask more questions. What?
Okay. Final answers.
Good. Anthony, you good with that?
Yeah.
All right. With that, concludes our mustache conversation on final answers, of which we have none. I will ask you all to, you know, give us some parting wisdom. Alex, you can go last. Okay. Because did you see the panicked look on his face? He's like, I can't. I don't. I need like give me 40 minutes. I'll be back. So we'll start with Azer and then Anthony and then Alex and then we'll let these nice people go back to their regular lives.
Final thoughts. Okay. I'll make it short. Ask me anything.
I like that. And I do. I do that often. Anthony?
Final thoughts are that I want to ask Azer a lot of things.
Oh, no.
So we've already had one mustache that I'm hoping actually materializes into a like, you know how like they have like those sitcoms and like Frasier's actually a sitcom that came from a sitcom. So Frasier was a character on Cheers, and then Cheers ended, and the show Frasier started, and Frasier in its own right was actually, I don't know if more successful, but at least as successful as Cheers. So Ray Malika wants to start a podcast with Rafiq Ataya, which I'm encouraging. I think that would be amazing. I told them I would do all the logistics, like I'll do all the postings. I'll be their tech guy. I don't care. It's so easy. So Anthony, if you wanted to start a podcast with Azer where you ask him questions, he already said, ask me anything. So he already offered implicitly. And you guys can even bring Alex along and he can just sit there. So think about it. All right, Alex.
I was gonna joke just to go full circle. Like, I hope Azer asks me questions.
Actually, that would
okay. I actually would. I may take you up on that. I would.
Yeah, I think my actual that ties into my actual takeaway was we didn't necessarily come up to like a solution whether or not we could institutionalize it, but it sounds like if nothing else, like as a person, I should be, if I want to be able for other people to answer my questions and be more open to it, I need to be open to people asking me questions and responding and doing that. So it may not be like an institutional change, but I think it sounds like something I should be working on. So the joke tied in well with the actual.
I don't know if that's lies or progress, but I'm good with either one.
So my question to you, Alex, is, I said, ask me any question, right? So what questions would you ask me? Here's my question to you. Not now, just, we'll.
So I think we all have that group text thread between the four of us. I look forward to hearing Alex's questions for Azer and for
and my question to him, right?
Yeah, like him answering your question to him, and Anthony hopefully following through on doing more of these, because I think the more conversations get spawned from these conversations, the better off we all are. So thank you all for doing this, and whoever's listened for the last 2 hours, thank you for sticking it out. Bye.
Thank you.